My name is Hike Yang, and I'm from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. In the following 15 minutes, I will briefly show some preliminary results from our study on how individual speakers of Mandarin mark prosodic focus in their production. Here is the outline of my presentation. Sorry. We know that linguists tend to use native speakers' data as the reference, but in fact, there are considerable variations even in the native speaker's speech. And this is called speaker variation or individual speaker differences. Research into individual speaker differences in speech production is of great significance because first, such kind of study will show the range of possible speaker variation of a given category. So it will help us to understand the way how speakers signal linguistic contrasts. And secondly, this kind of research also help us to approach the link between speech production and speech perception. And thirdly, the results can have some implications in related areas of speech communication, such as robust speech recognition and talker normalization. There are a lot of studies on individual differences in the segments such as VOT and vowel formants, but very little is known about the individual speakers' marking of information structure. What we are interested in is prosodic focus, and focus is a linguistic device that's used to separate presupposed and new information. Although there are different means to convey focus, such as syntactic means or morphological means, but in that study we concern with about prosodic focus. And it has been shown that cross-linguistically, various acoustic cues are employed to signal information structure. Particularly in Mandarin Chinese, focus influences the mean F0, duration, and intensity in both the local and global regions. In this study, we want to investigate whether and how individual speakers of Mandarin mark prosodic focus differently in their production. Specifically, we want to examine the individual differences in the use of F0, duration, and intensity in different regions in two types of Mandarin focus types, which I will show very soon. So I'll quickly introduce how we conducted this study. We invited 11 native speakers of Mandarin, and for the stimuli, we used 6 subject-verb-object declarative sentences, and the 6 sentences have exactly the same structure. In fact, we collected different types of focus, but in this presentation, I will show only 2 types of them. The first one is broad focus, and when we say broad focus, we refer to the situation in which the whole utterance is under focus. So we elicited all the focus types by precursor questions. In this case, we would ask, "What did you say?" And we assume that the whole sentence is under focus. And the next type we included here is verb focus, which means the main verb of the sentence as the drinks here in this sentence. So we only consider these 2 types, the broad focus and the verb focus, in today's presentation. Okay, so the stimuli were prepared in question and answer pairs, and I asked the questions during the experiment and instructed the participants to answer them as naturally as possible. We recorded the whole experiment, but only the answers were further processed for analysis. Here's how we did the data processing. We extracted the mean F0, duration, and intensity values of each syllable. And because the F0 values were originally measured in hertz, we converted them to semitones individually with mean F0 of each speaker as reference. We analyzed the data with linear mixed effects models for each region specifically. By each region, I mean, for example, because our focus is on the verb, right? And Mandarin is an SVO synced language. So the verb position is the unfocused position. And the subject is the pre-focus region. And the object is the post-focus region. Okay. Next, I'll show the results. Let's first take a quick look at the group results. A shows the F0 data, and B the duration, and C the intensity. Our statistic model suggests that focus increased the mean F0 and lengthened the duration, and also increased the intensity in the unfocused region. For the other regions, only the effect of focus on F0 was significant for both subject and object. Okay, and I will show some descriptive data of the individual results. First, let's take a look at the individual F0 data. Figure A shows the pre-focus subject position, from which we can find that speakers 4, it seems that this speaker did not distinguish these two types of focus in the pre-focus condition. And speaker 2 even had raised the F0 in the pre-focus position. And so there are quite a lot of variations here. In the object position, the post-focus position, which is shown by figure B, sorry. We can find that there was consistent post-focus F0 compression, but the extent to which the F0 was compressed also varied a lot. For example, in speaker 7, it is the degree was not very huge, but in speaker 11, we can see that the drop was very high. Okay, and here we put the F0 data of 4 speakers here, and let's first take a look at speaker 1. We found that actually speaker 1 did not distinguish these two focus types in the verb position, but this speaker actually distinguished the pre-focus and the post-focus, and in these two positions, the mean F0 value was lowered. So in this way, this speaker still can make the verb the most prominent in the sentence. For speakers 2 and 4, we found that these two speakers did not distinguish the subject position, the pre-focus position, but they marked both the verb position and the object positions. And lastly, the figure of speaker 10 resembled that of the group data. So there's pre-focus lowering, on-focus raising, as well as post-focus lowering here. Okay. Next, the duration data. Again, let's take a look at the subject position first. We found that speaker 1 did not distinguish them, and speakers 5 and 6, there is shortening of pre-focus duration, but speaker 9 even lengthened the pre-focus duration here. How about the verb position in figure B? We found that all the speakers lengthened the duration, but the degree varied a lot. For example, speaker 1 did not lengthen much, while speaker 8 lengthened a lot here. Lastly, in the post-focus position, we found that speakers 3 and 11, they did not distinguish the duration values here. And speaker 1, there is shortening here, but speaker 6 showed lengthening. And next, let's look at some speakers' duration data. So for speaker 5, we didn't, this speaker did not distinguish the object position, but he or she distinguished subject and verb position, while speaker 8 did not distinguish subject position. So again, we see a lot of variations here. And lastly, let's take a look at the intensity data. In the subject position, we found that subject speaker 6 and speakers 6 and 11 showed pre-focus lowering, but the first two speakers, speakers 2 and 5, did not. And for the unfocused intensity, we didn't find any unfocused marking from speaker 5 and speaker 9. And in the object position, it seems that all the speakers lowered their intensity, but again, the degree was quite different for each speaker. Okay, and sorry. And here we've again for the this intensity, we found that speaker 1 did not mark unfocused intensity, but the speaker showed pre and post lowering of intensity. And speaker 5 only lowered post-focus intensity here, but did not quite distinguish the first two positions. So next, I'll quickly summarize the main findings. We investigated how individual speakers differed in marking Mandarin broad focus and verb focus. And we found that at the group level, there was focus effect on the acoustic cues, especially in the unfocused position. While at the individual level, there were great variations among speakers in terms of the extent to which the cues were employed. Next, we want to propose a hierarchy of the acoustic cues in Mandarin focus marking. Because our focus is on the verb position, so in order for this information to be perceived by a listener, the ideal situation is that the verb is the most prominent. So we think that in an ideal situation, the verb should have the highest F0, the longest duration, as well as the greatest intensity. And the pre and post focus positions should be less salient. So with that in mind, we counted the violation of the cases in our data. Recall that we have 11 participants. So for each acoustic cues, there are 13 cases. So from the data, after we counted the violation, we found that only 4 cases for F0, while there were 17 cases for duration and 7 cases for intensity. So we proposed that maybe in Mandarin, F0 was the most, the highest in the rank, while duration was the lowest. But of course, this needs to be confirmed with other statistical methods, for example, the linear discriminant analysis. And next, there are also some remaining issues. First, what we considered were only the mean values. So it is necessary to include the dynamics of these acoustic cues to account for the observed individual differences in our data. And also, we think it's very important to test how much each acoustic cue contributes to the perception of Mandarin focus. But if we need to design a focus perception test, another issue is how can we select stimuli, given that there are so huge variations in the production data. So to sum up, our study indicated the role of F0 duration and intensity at both the group and individual levels. And there were huge individual variations in Mandarin focus marking. And we raised issues for follow-up studies. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions, please? I don't see any hands. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation.
I would like.
Yes, please.
Coming. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there are a lot of things to discuss about focus. The first thing, it's a colleague of ours, EU in London, who has done a lot of work on focus and Chinese. Do you know his work?
Yes, actually, we've consulted some of his work, yes.
Okay. We have done a lot of work about those things, and it's good that I see it's as if I see my work in a diachronic perspective. Well, I would corroborate your findings. First, yes, F0 is the most important correlate of focus in many languages. I think you're right. But the increase, the tonal raise of the word is focus is irrelevant. I was thinking at the beginning, a lot of times it is a lot raised, substantially raised, but it's not the absolute height of the F0. It is the postfocal flattening which indicates where the focus is. It is the flattening, the postfocal flattening, which is the we have done a lot of perceptual experiments, which shows where the focus is. And the other thing, EU and I, in a conference, he said, no, we have only postfocal flattening. But we had found for Greek that we have prefocal lower range. Even pre-focus, we don't have considerable variations. So in pre-focus position, you may have variations up and down over zero, but you may have quite a flattening. And now I come to the most important point, duration. I see that you say that duration is a correlate, but not as strong as the other ones. Well, that is what we have found for Greek, and we should investigate more because in some studies we have found no duration correlate. Focus and focus, same duration. In some studies we have found some tendencies. And the question now, the work we have been doing recently is, okay, in statements, you have F0, the main correlate, and no duration or a secondary correlate. But what about questions? In the Greek questions, we don't have any F0 variability or correlate or focus there. Maybe duration is coming forward there because different parameters have different significances and they function as perceptual correlates in different contexts. So I mean to say, in this context, in statements, maybe duration is not the main correlate, but in other type of sentences, that is my point. And I mean to say, I think is a well-planned and well-done research, but you should reserve your findings and expand to other types of sentences, combination of focus with other types of sentences and other functions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments.